still remember that night like it's carved into the back of my mind, the kind of memory that doesn't fade even when you really want it to, and every time I think about it, I feel a mix of regret, embarrassment, and weirdly gratitude. It was supposed to be simple. Sneak out, hit the party my friends had been talking about for weeks, have a few laughs, feel a little alive, and come back before anyone noticed. That was the plan, and in my head it sounded perfect, like the kind of harmless teenage rebellion people laugh about years later. But real life is never as smooth as it plays in your imagination. I spent almost an hour pacing around my room, convincing myself I wasn't doing anything that wrong, telling myself everyone does it, telling myself my parents wouldn't understand because they grew up in a totally different world. And honestly, I was tired of always being the responsible kid, the one who never messed up, never broke rules, never gave them a reason to question me. That night, I just wanted to feel like I had my own life, my own choices, my own moment away from constant expectations. When I finally slipped out, the air felt colder than I expected, like the universe itself was whispering, "Turn back." But I ignored it. I walked fast, heart pounding in my chest, every little sound making me feel like someone was watching. But I pushed through it until I met my friends down the street, loud, excited, carefree in a way I wished I could be. The party was exactly what I expected. Loud music shaking the walls, people laughing over nothing, cheap lights blinking like a low-budget nightclub, the smell of soda, perfume, sweat, and bad decisions mixed together. But for a while, I forgot everything, the rules, the fear, the consequences. I just blended in, letting the noise swallow me, pretending I wasn't thinking about home every 5 minutes, pretending I wasn't checking my phone like a paranoid criminal, pretending I wasn't imagining my parents opening my door, and finding my empty bed. The night went from fun to stressful real quick when my phone started vibrating nonstop. First a message from my mom, then another, then a call, then multiple calls, and suddenly I felt my stomach drop like I'd swallowed a stone. I stepped outside, cold air hitting my face harder this time, the guilt sinking in like a weight I couldn't escape. I didn't answer at first. I was scared, ashamed, confused, but when I finally picked up, the sound of my mom's voice, that mix of fear and anger, hit me harder than any punishment ever could. She wasn't screaming. She was scared, and that hurt more. My dad took the phone, and his voice was low, disappointed, calm in a way that made me feel even worse. They told me to come home immediately. The walk back felt like miles even though it was just a few blocks, every step heavy, every thought louder than the music I had just escaped. The moment I opened the door, the atmosphere inside wasn't loud or explosive. It was heavy, painful, like the air itself was judging me. My parents stood there, not yelling, not throwing anger in my face, just staring, trying to understand what went through my mind, why I didn't trust them enough to be honest. And honestly, in that moment, I didn't feel like some cool, rebellious teenager. I felt like a little kid who broke something precious. They asked me why I snuck out when I could have just talked to them. I didn't have a good answer. I just stood there, feeling stupid, feeling small, feeling like I'd disappointed the only two people who cared about me more than anyone else ever would. But the crazy part is, instead of turning it into a war, they turned it into a conversation. A real one. The kind we never had before. They talked about their fears, about the world being different now, more dangerous, more unpredictable, and how every parent just wants to know their kid is safe. And for the first time, I told them how suffocated I felt sometimes, how I felt like they expected perfection from me even if they never said it directly, how I didn't want to be the good kid every second of my life, how I wanted space, trust, independence. It wasn't an easy conversation. I was defensive, they were emotional, and every sentence felt like walking through a minefield. But slowly, something shifted. The anger turned into understanding. The fear turned into honesty. And the walls we built over years, walls we didn't even know existed, started to crack. My parents admitted they needed to trust me more, give me room to make mistakes, let me learn on my own instead of trying to control every detail. And I had to admit that sneaking out wasn't the way to prove anything, that communication is better than rebellion, that trust only works if it goes both ways. We talked for hours, longer than we ever had before, and by the time the sun started rising, something between us had changed. Not magically fixed, not instantly perfect, but better, real. That night didn't just get me caught sneaking out. It opened a door we had all been avoiding. It forced us to face the uncomfortable truth that growing up isn't just hard for kids. It's hard for parents too. And looking back, as much as I wish I could erase the shame of that night, I'm weirdly grateful for it, because sometimes the worst moments create the biggest shifts. Sometimes getting caught isn't the end. It's the beginning of finally understanding each other. And that one mistake, that one stupid decision, somehow brought us closer than all the perfect behavior ever did. And as I stepped farther away from my house, I kept telling myself that everything would be fine, that I deserved one night to breathe, to feel normal, to be around people my own age without the constant pressure of expectations wrapping around my chest like a tight seatbelt. The cold air outside felt like freedom, and honestly, for the first few minutes, that tiny walk towards the street where my friend was supposed to pick me up felt like the most rebellious thing I had ever done. The party itself wasn't even the real reason I snuck out. It was more about escaping the routine, the rules, the constant supervision that felt heavier every single day. When I reached the car, my friends cheered like I had just done something heroic, and for a moment I actually believed it. Music was blasting, windows were down, and there was this stupid confidence inside me that made me think that tonight would be unforgettable in the best way. But halfway through the ride, a small part of me kept hearing my dad's voice reminding me to be responsible, my mom's voice asking if I needed anything, and that guilt kept coming and going like a soft background noise I tried to ignore. When we got to the party, lights were flashing, people were laughing, and the whole place smelled like a mix of soda, cheap perfume, and that faint teenage chaos you find at every American house party. I tried acting like I belonged there, like I wasn't worried about getting caught, but honestly my phone in my pocket felt like a ticking bomb. Every vibration made my heart jump, and even when I wasn't touching it, I could swear I could feel it heating up, waiting to expose me. But somehow, I pushed all of that to the side and tried to enjoy the night. For a while, it actually worked. I talked to people I hadn't seen in months, played stupid party games, and laughed louder than I had in weeks. But it didn't take long before everything flipped. I glanced at my phone and saw 24 missed calls from my mom, followed by a short message from my dad that simply said, "We need to talk. Now." And in that second, it felt like the entire room froze. The music didn't sound fun anymore. The lights felt too bright, and the crowd suddenly felt like a reminder of every bad decision I had made that night. My hands were shaking so badly that even holding my phone felt impossible. I stepped outside, trying to figure out what to say. But honestly, there was nothing that could make me look innocent because I wasn't. I knew the moment I sneaked out that this could happen. When I finally called back, my mom's voice didn't sound angry at first. It sounded scared, and that hit me harder than any yelling possibly could. She asked where I was, if I was okay, and why I didn't tell them. I didn't have an answer. I just stood there in the cold night air, wishing I could rewind everything, wishing I could undo the one decision that brought me to this exact moment. My dad took the phone next, and his voice was the complete opposite, calm, deep, disappointed in a way that cut straight through me. He told me they were already on their way to pick me up. That 30-minute wait felt like the longest, heaviest countdown of my life. When their car finally pulled up, the look on their faces told me everything. My mom's eyes were red like she had been crying the entire time, and my dad's jaw was tense, the way it gets when he's holding back anger because he knows yelling won't fix anything. The drive home was completely silent. No radio, no questions, no arguing. Just silence, the kind that makes your stomach twist. And trust me, that silence hurt more than any lecture. When we got home, I expected them to explode, to ground me for life, to take away everything I cared about. But instead, something completely unexpected happened. They sat me down, not to punish me, but to talk. Not the usual "you messed up" talk, but a real conversation, one that I could feel was coming from fear more than fury. My dad asked what was actually going on with me, why I felt the need to sneak out instead of asking permission like a normal human being, and for the first time in months I actually told them the truth. Not the polished version, not the "I'm fine" version, the real one. I told them how suffocating things had felt lately, how every rule felt like a cage, how I didn't want to disappoint them but I also didn't want to miss out on life, how sometimes I felt like they were watching every step I made. My mom listened without interrupting, which honestly shocked me because she usually jumps in the second she hears something emotional. My dad leaned back and looked at me like he was seeing me properly for the first time in a long time. And the more I talked, the more the tension in the room softened. They told me they weren't angry because I went to a party. They were angry because I didn't trust them enough to tell them. They admitted that maybe they had been too strict recently, that maybe they forgot I was growing up and needed space, that maybe their fear of losing control made them hold on too tightly. Hearing that from them felt unreal, like something I never expected. And that night, instead of a war, we ended up having the most honest conversation we'd had in years. The kind that strips away all the walls and all the assumptions and all the you never understand me stuff that usually gets in the way. By the time we were done talking, it was already early morning. They didn't ground me for months, they didn't take away my phone, they didn't punish me just to prove a point. Instead, they asked me to promise one thing, not to hide from them again. And somehow, after everything, that felt more powerful than any punishment ever could. That night changed everything between us. It didn't fix everything instantly, but it opened a door we never had before. A door where trust wasn't something we demanded. It was something we rebuilt, slowly, honestly, together. And maybe sneaking out was the biggest mistake I made, but the truth is, it also became the reason we finally understood each other on a level we never had before. And as I stepped outside, the cold air hit me with that strange mix of freedom and fear, the kind that makes your heart beat just a little faster than normal, reminding you that you're doing something you probably shouldn't be doing. The street looked empty, almost too calm, like the whole world was asleep except me, and for a moment I actually felt proud of myself for pulling it off. Sneaking out, slipping past the creaky hallway floorboards, avoiding that one-door hinge that always squeaks. I kept replaying in my head how I'd walk back in later, acting normal, pretending nothing happened, convincing myself that I was smart enough to outplay my parents. But the truth is, I wasn't outsmarting anyone. I was just delaying the moment reality would catch up. When I finally reached the party, everything felt loud, bright, chaotic. Music so strong it vibrated through my chest, people shouting, laughing, dancing like tomorrow didn't exist. For a while, I let myself get lost in it, pretending I had no responsibilities, no rule, no consequences waiting at home. But even while I was smiling and talking, there was this tiny knot in my stomach, that silent reminder that sooner or later, I'd have to face the night I tried so hard to escape from. It wasn't until I stepped back outside, long after midnight, that I realized my phone had blown up with missed calls and messages. My mom, my dad, over and over again. And in that moment, the cold air didn't feel exciting anymore. It felt heavy, like I was walking straight into a storm I created myself. The road back home felt longer than usual, every step filled with dread. I kept trying to rehearse excuses in my head. Maybe I could say I fell asleep. Maybe I could pretend I didn't hear my phone. Maybe I could lie my way out of this like people do in movies. But deep down, I knew none of it would work. I wasn't dealing with strangers. I was dealing with the two people who could read even the smallest change in my voice. The lights were on when I got home. Not dim, not soft. Fully bright. The kind of bright that tells you someone is wide awake, waiting, worried, angry. I barely turned the handle when the door opened from inside, and the look on their faces, disappointment, fear, frustration, hit me harder than any punishment ever could. They didn't even yell at first. They just looked at me, and that silence was worse than shouting. It made me feel smaller than I had ever felt in my life. Eventually the questions started. Where were you? Why didn't you answer your phone? Do you have any idea what we thought? And each one felt like a weight dropping straight onto my chest. I wanted to defend myself, to argue, to explain, but the truth was simple. I messed up. I broke their trust, and I could see how deeply it hurt them. But something unexpected happened as the conversation kept going. Instead of turning into a screaming match, it turned into a real talk. An honest, raw, uncomfortable conversation about choices, responsibility, trust, and how quickly it can all fall apart. For the first time, I saw things from their side. Their fear wasn't control, it was care. Their anger wasn't hatred, it was worry. And somewhere between the tears, the explanations, the frustration, something shifted. We started understanding each other in a way we never had before. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fun. But it was real. And weirdly enough, that night, the worst night of my life at the time, became the reason our relationship actually got better. That mistake opened a door we'd been avoiding for years. It forced us to talk, to listen, to trust in a way that wasn't based on rules but on honesty. And sometimes that's exactly what it takes. One bad decision, one hard conversation, one long night where everything falls apart just enough for you to finally rebuild it stronger than before. And even though my phone kept buzzing with "bro, hurry up" texts, my mind was still half stuck on the possibility of getting caught. I slipped out quietly, closed the door without a sound, and for a few minutes I actually felt free, like I was doing something rebellious for the first time in years. The night air felt colder than usual, maybe because my guilt was sitting heavy in my chest, but I kept walking anyway, convincing myself that I deserved one night to just be stupid, reckless, whatever you want to call it. When I finally reached the party, the loud music, flashing lights, and the smell of cheap perfume and energy drinks hit me all at once. Everyone looked carefree, laughing, shouting, living in a world where consequences didn't exist. I tried to blend in, pretending my mind wasn't stuck back home wondering if my parents had checked my room yet. Hours passed in a blur. Dancing, talking, pretending everything was fine, until suddenly my phone buzzed again. But this time it wasn't my friends. It was my dad. A missed call. Then another. Then a message. "Where are you?" My stomach dropped so fast it felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. I stepped outside, heart racing harder than the music inside. Before I could even think of a lie or an excuse, I saw headlights turning into the street, slow and deliberate, like they already knew exactly where I was. And then I saw them. My parents, sitting in the front seat, disappointment written so clearly on their faces it almost hurt to look at them. My dad didn't shout, he didn't even get out of the car right away. He just stared at me with this expression that felt heavier than anger. My mom's eyes were glossy, like she wasn't sure whether to cry or scream. Walking toward that car felt like the longest walk of my life, every step reminding me how badly I had messed up. The silence when I opened the door was brutal, louder than any yelling they could have done. The drive home felt endless, and every second of it I kept thinking, why did I do this? Was this stupid party really worth breaking their trust? When we finally reached home, I expected rage, punishment, everything. But instead, something I didn't expect happened. My dad sat down across from me at the dining table, arms crossed, eyes tired, and he didn't explode. He asked me why. Not sarcastically, not aggressively, genuinely. And that hit me harder than any anger ever could. For the first time, I told them things I never said out loud, about feeling restricted, feeling like they didn't trust me even when I tried, feeling pressured to be perfect all the time. My voice cracked more than once, and my mom's did too. It wasn't a fight. It was messy, emotional, honest. For the first time in years, all three of us were actually talking, not pretending everything was fine. The night that started with me sneaking out ended with something completely different. Understanding. It didn't magically fix everything, but it opened a door I didn't even realize had been shut for so long. And looking back now, as much as I regret disappointing them, a part of me knows that if that night hadn't happened, we never would have had that conversation that forced all of us to finally be real with each other. My phone kept buzzing with those "bro, hurry up" texts, and honestly, that stupid excitement completely overshadowed the small voice in my head, telling me this was a terrible idea. I slipped outside, closed the door as quietly as I could, and for a moment I felt this fake sense of freedom, like I had done something bold, something smart, something grown up, until that feeling slowly started fading the closer I got to the party. The music was blasting from the end of the street, the kind that makes you feel like you're walking into a movie scene, but even while I tried to act cool, there was this weird heaviness sitting in my chest. I kept thinking about how my parents trusted me enough to not check my room every 5 minutes, how they believed I was sleeping peacefully, how they had no clue I was sneaking around like some undercover idiot trying to impress people who probably wouldn't even remember I was there the next day. Still, I walked in, pretending everything was fine, pretending I belonged there, pretending I wasn't scared as hell. And the party itself wasn't even that great. Just loud music, drunk people yelling nonsense. Lights flashing so harshly they made everyone look more confused than happy. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny, held drinks I didn't even sip, nodded through conversations I didn't care about, all while this guilt sat behind my ribs like a tight knot, reminding me every few minutes that I wasn't supposed to be there. And then suddenly, everything collapsed in one moment. My phone lit up with my mom's name, and one single call turned my entire night upside down. I froze so instantly it felt like the whole room stopped moving. I didn't even answer at first, just stared at the screen like maybe if I didn't touch it, the problem would magically disappear. But it didn't. The second call came. Then a message. "Where are you?" That was it. My heart dropped so fast. I swear I felt it in my stomach. I left the party without saying goodbye to anyone, walking down the street with my pulse racing, the cold air hitting my face like punishment. And when I saw my parents standing at the door waiting for me, their expressions a mix of anger, disappointment, worry, fear, I knew I had messed up in a way that wouldn't be forgotten easily. They didn't yell at first, which somehow felt worse. That silent look hit harder than any shouting could. When we finally sat down, the anger came in waves, and yeah, I deserved every single one of them. But somewhere between their shouting and my fumbling excuses, something unexpected happened. The conversation slowly shifted from anger to honesty, from fear to understanding. I told them why I went, what I was trying to prove, how I didn't want to feel left out anymore, how sometimes being a teenager feels like you're constantly stuck between wanting independence and being terrified of screwing everything up. And instead of laughing at me or judging me, they actually listened. For the first time in a long time, we weren't arguing, we were talking. Not as parent versus kid, but as three humans trying to understand each other. They admitted they get scared of losing me, scared of the world outside, scared of the mistakes they know I'll make because they made them too. I realized they weren't just angry at what I did. They were scared because they care. And that night, the same moment that could have broken our trust actually ended up rebuilding it. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but something shifted in that living room. They saw me differently, and I saw them differently too. And now, when I look back, I'm almost grateful I got caught, because if I hadn't, we would have never had that brutally honest conversation that changed everything. Even though my friends' messages and excited emojis were pushing me forward, making the whole situation feel manageable and like one night of fun wouldn't matter, I couldn't shake off the creeping anxiety building inside me. As I stepped out the back door and moved quietly across the shadowed yard toward the car waiting for me, my heart was racing faster than I expected. Every creak of the porch and every rustle of leaves felt magnified, as if the world was conspiring to catch me in the act. I tried to tell myself it was just a small adventure, nothing serious, but deep down I knew that if I got caught, the trust my parents had in me, already fragile at times, could shatter completely. Once I got into the car, the cold night air hit my face, and the blur of streetlights rushing past gave me a strange thrill, a mix of freedom and fear I had never felt before. My friends laughed and joked in the back seat, talking over the music and the road noise, and I tried to join in, but my mind kept drifting back to the potential consequences. What if someone saw me? What if I got pulled over? What if my parents found out? Even with all that excitement around me, my guilt was growing faster than the adrenaline, and it felt like every laugh and every shout in the car was echoing against the anxiety building in my chest. By the time we arrived at the party, the music was pounding so loudly it almost drowned out my racing thoughts, and the flashing lights, smoke machines, and crowd of people created a kind of chaotic energy that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I tried to blend in, thinking that no one would notice me, that I could just disappear into the crowd and have a normal night, but the constant nagging in the back of my mind kept reminding me of home, of my parents, and of the rules I had broken. Then my phone buzzed. Just a quick vibration, a subtle notification, but it made my stomach drop. One simple message, blinking on the screen, from my mom. "Where are you? Come home now." My heart literally stopped for a moment. I froze, staring at the message over and over, trying to come up with some excuse, some explanation, anything to make this feel less real. But the truth was undeniable. I had been caught, even if only by a text, and now there was no hiding from the consequences. Panic started to set in, but I also knew that ignoring it wouldn't solve anything. I felt trapped between the party, the fleeting sense of freedom, and the undeniable responsibility waiting for me back home. After a moment that felt like hours, I made the decision to leave. I told my friends I had to go, and as I walked back to the car, every step felt heavier than the last. The drive home was long, quiet, and filled with tension. Every streetlight and passing car seemed to remind me of my mistake. My mind raced with thoughts of what awaited me. Anger, disappointment, lectures, maybe even punishment. But alongside the fear, I also felt a strange sense of determination. I needed to face this, to own up to my actions, and maybe, just maybe, rebuild the trust one had risked losing. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house looked both comforting and intimidating at the same time. My parents were waiting, their expressions a complicated mix of relief, anger, and disappointment. I walked in, my legs heavy, my head down, and knew there was no hiding, no quick excuse, no way to smooth things over. The conversation that followed was intense, long, and honest in ways I hadn't anticipated. My parents listened as I explained my thought process, my feelings, and yes, even my mistakes, while they shared theirs, expressing the worry and hurt that had built up inside them. At first, I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but slowly, as the discussion went on, it became a dialogue, a mutual understanding forming between us. We talked about boundaries, expectations, and respect, and I began to realize that trust wasn't something that could be taken for granted. It was fragile, valuable, and required constant care. That night, what had started as a reckless decision turned into a turning point in our relationship. I learned lessons about honesty, responsibility, and communication that no amount of scolding could have taught me. By the end of the conversation, there was a quiet sense of resolution. I had faced my mistake, I had been heard, and I had started the process of earning back the trust one had jeopardized. Walking to my room that night, I felt a mix of relief and reflection. I knew mistakes were part of growing up, but I also understood the weight of consequences and the power of sincere communication. That night wasn't just about sneaking out. It was about learning, understanding, and realizing that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, but only through honesty, patience, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. And even now, thinking back on it, I recognize that one night, one reckless choice, and one honest conversation changed the way I saw my parents, my responsibilities, and even myself. After that night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying every moment, from the thrill of sneaking out, to the panic when I saw that text, to the heavy silence in the car on the way home. Every detail seemed amplified in my mind, and I realized just how quickly a simple choice could spiral into something far more serious. I thought about my parents' faces, the way their eyes reflected both worry and disappointment, and it hit me that they weren't just upset because I broke a rule. They were upset because they trusted me, and they expected me to respect that trust. I began to see the bigger picture. Freedom isn't just about doing whatever I want. It comes with responsibility, and sometimes the smallest decisions can have the biggest consequences. In those quiet moments before sleep, I felt a strange mix of guilt, relief, and gratitude. Guilt for putting myself and my parents through that stress. Relief for making the decision to go home before things got worse. And gratitude that our conversation hadn't completely shattered what we had built over the years. That reflection stayed with me for days. Every time I went about my normal routine, I kept thinking about the night, about how quickly fun could turn into regret, and how important it was to communicate honestly rather than trying to hide things. Even interactions with friends started to feel different. I noticed that the carefree laughter and joking around at the party had an edge now, a reminder that choices have consequences, and I couldn't just brush over them anymore. When I saw my parents again in the following days, there was a subtle shift in our relationship. There was still love, still comfort, but now there was a deeper understanding. They didn't need to constantly watch over me to know I understood their concerns, and I didn't need to hide my actions to avoid conflict. The trust that had been shaken was beginning to rebuild, stronger because it had been tested and survived. I started thinking about the lessons I had learned, not just for myself but in general. Life is full of moments where decisions seem small or insignificant, but the ripple effects can be enormous. Responsibility, honesty, and respect aren't just abstract ideas. They are the foundation of meaningful relationships. That one night, which could have been remembered as just a mistake, instead became a milestone in my growth. I realized that accountability isn't something to fear. It's an opportunity to show integrity and maturity. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I started applying these lessons to other areas of my life, friendships, school, and even casual interactions. I became more thoughtful, more aware of how my actions affected others, and more willing to face difficult conversations rather than avoiding them. Looking back, I also realized something else. That sense of rebellion I had felt at the party wasn't bad in itself. Wanting freedom, wanting to explore, wanting to experience life outside the boundaries of home. All of that is normal. What mattered was how I balanced that desire with responsibility. That balance, I understood, would be a lifelong challenge, and learning it in small doses like that night was better than learning it through catastrophic mistakes. As weeks passed, I noticed subtle changes in my parents too. Their approach wasn't harsher. In fact, it was more understanding. They listened more and lectured less, creating a space where I felt comfortable sharing my thoughts without fear of immediate judgment. Our conversations became richer, more honest, and even though disagreements still happened, there was a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. And I think that's the real lesson. The night I got caught wasn't just about sneaking out. It was about recognizing the fragility of trust and the power of open, honest communication. The embarrassment, the anxiety, the guilt, they all served a purpose. They forced me to reflect, to grow, and to become someone capable of understanding consequences and taking responsibility. Over time, I even started sharing parts of that experience with friends, not as a way to boast or make myself seem heroic, but as a cautionary tale and a reflection on personal growth. And the more I talked about it, the more I realized that nearly everyone has moments like this, moments where they make mistakes, where they test boundaries, and where they face the challenge of rebuilding trust. It's universal, and that universality made the experience feel less isolating. I began to see it not just as a personal milestone, but as a shared human experience, learning to navigate the tension between independence and responsibility, between freedom and accountability. As I continued to think about that night, I realized that part of growing up isn't just about making mistakes. It's about what you do after the mistake. Everyone messes up at some point, but it's the way you respond, the way you face the consequences, and the lessons you take away that really define you. I remembered sitting in my room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the second I left the house, to the car ride, to the party, and finally to the moment I walked back in. It felt like watching a movie of myself, but with the added weight of knowing every choice had meaning. That reflection made me understand something I hadn't before. Trust isn't given lightly, and once it's challenged, repairing it takes more than just words. It takes consistent actions, patience, and sincerity. Over the next few days, I noticed the little things I had taken for granted before. The way my parents would casually ask how my day was, the small conversations over dinner, the way they would check in on me without overreacting. Those things, which had felt routine or even annoying at times, suddenly seemed priceless. I began to appreciate not just their presence, but their guidance and the boundaries they set, realizing those boundaries weren't meant to control me, but to protect me and teach me responsibility. At the same time, I noticed changes in myself. I was more aware of my actions, more careful with decisions, and more willing to communicate openly rather than hide things out of fear. The experience gave me a sense of maturity that was subtle but real. It wasn't about being perfect anymore. It was about understanding consequences and embracing accountability. Even thinking about future situations, like going out with friends or handling tricky choices at school or work, I found myself pausing, reflecting, and asking, is this the responsible way? How will my actions affect others? That pause, that moment of reflection, was something I hadn't done before that night. And yet, I also realized that mistakes don't have to define you. They can be the moments that teach you the most if you let them. The night I got caught sneaking out wasn't just embarrassing. It was transformative. It forced me to confront fear, guilt, and the discomfort of honest conversation. It taught me empathy, the importance of perspective, and the value of dialogue. Also showed me that love and trust are resilient. Even when shaken, they can be rebuilt with effort, honesty, and mutual respect. Looking back now, I can see how that single night shaped not just my relationship with my parents but my approach to life in general. I became more conscious of my actions, more considerate of others' feelings, and more willing to embrace responsibility instead of avoiding it. And while the thrill of rebellion, the excitement of doing something forbidden, will always be a part of growing up, I've learned how to balance it with integrity. Freedom, I realized, isn't the absence of rules. It's knowing how to navigate life with awareness, respect, and accountability. That night wasn't just a mistake. It was a lesson, a turning point, and a memory that I carry with me every day. It reminded me that life is full of choices, and the way we handle those choices shapes who we become. And so, even now, when I think back to sneaking out, the panic, the fear, and the long conversation that followed, I don't just remember the embarrassment. I remember the growth, the understanding, and the trust that was rebuilt stronger than before. It's a lesson I know I'll carry into every decision, every relationship, and every challenge ahead. The moral of this experience is simple yet powerful. Trust, honesty, and responsibility are the foundation of every meaningful relationship. Whether with your parents, friends, or anyone who cares about you. It's easy to think that small choices like sneaking out for a party are harmless, but in reality, even minor decisions carry consequences. Every action we take sends a message about who we are, what we value, and how much we respect the people around us. This story shows that mistakes are inevitable, and no one is perfect, but what truly defines us is how we respond to those mistakes. Running away from accountability only makes the consequences heavier, while facing them with honesty and humility can turn a negative situation into a transformative one. Growth often comes from discomfort, fear, and reflection. And this experience proves that confronting your own actions, even when it's uncomfortable, strengthens character and builds maturity. Another important lesson is that communication is key. Many problems in life, big or small, can be solved or mitigated through open and honest conversation. Avoiding dialogue, hiding the truth, or trying to justify bad decisions only prolongs the conflict and increases tension. Finally, freedom and responsibility are inseparable. True freedom doesn't mean doing whatever you want without thinking. It means understanding the impact of your choices and acting with integrity. The thrill of rebellion or breaking rules may feel exciting in the moment, but the deeper reward lies in respecting boundaries, learning from experiences, and earning the trust of those who support you. At the end of the day, the night I got caught wasn't just a mistake. It was a turning point that taught me the value of accountability, empathy, and responsible decision-making. Carrying these lessons forward will not only improve relationships, but also shape a life guided by honesty, respect, and trustworthiness.